Good morning and welcome to episode 14 of The Library. My name is Bethany. I'm so happy you're here. Before we get started on today's topic, which I think is going to be really interesting, I want to show you my outfit because this shirt, you can only see the first part of it, but it has like a whole message and it's so fun. Okay, so remember guys, I just think that we're just sitting around in the library having a conversation. So this is what you get. All right, look. Oh Happy Day. Oh Happy Day sweatshirt is from a company. This is not sponsored by them at all. They don't even know I exist. But it's called The Happiest Tees on Earth. And they do Disney inspired t-shirts and hoodies. And which is why you see the Mickey Mouse ears. And I'm telling you, the owner of that company is truly the happiest person in the whole world. Like, she's a delight. I'll put the link in the description if you want to go check it out. Again, it's not even sponsored. She doesn't know who I am, but she is so sweet. Okay, also we're going to talk about a really interesting subject today. And so the books that are listed that I'm going to talk about, they're always listed in my description. So if you see the Amazon link, it is affiliated link. It doesn't cost you anything if you click on the link, but it is a tremendous help to me. So thank you so much. So if you're interested in any of the books I mentioned, they'll be there. Okay, so today I want to talk about, in my opinion, what makes a book a good book versus a bad book. And I want to preface this by saying that, I think one of the greatest things about reading is that it's such a unique and deeply personal journey for every single person. And so sometimes there are books that are widely popular, and that's because of a group of people, a large group of people, that they're enjoying the same book. Sometimes it's because of the writing, sometimes it's because of the storytelling, sometimes it's because of the hype, if we're totally honest. So I think that's just really interesting that you can dislike popular books as much as you can like unpopular books, because it's very reflective of your personal reading journey, right? A few years ago, I stopped using Goodreads, which is an app that helps record your reading journey, kind of like Spotify keeps track of what you listen to. Goodreads does that for readers. And one of the things that they have on there is you can rate the books 1 to 5. 1 obviously being a 1-star rating, meaning you didn't really like it very much, and then 5-star being this is the best book I ever read in my whole entire life. I really struggled with that aspect of Goodreads so much, because to me, I felt like if we're just quantifying a book by stars, 1 star to 5-star, then we're not really even talking about what our personal experience is, because we're focusing on how we're going to rate this with the stars. And so on my old Goodreads account, everything was 4 or 5 stars because I just felt what I really struggled with the concept of what is a bad book? What is a bad book? If I don't like the subject, I don't like the topic, or I struggle with some of the things that in the book, does that make it a bad book, or does that just mean that it's not the book for me? I don't know. So I left Goodreads and I use the old pen and paper option, and I keep track of my books that I'm reading on that. Because I felt like that was more accurate for me to kind of step away from that, and it just felt like it was very limiting. So that really brings, what do I consider a good book? For me, a good book is one that makes me think. If I am regularly quoting from a book, or I'm regularly referencing a book, that is a really easy way for you to know, or for me to be able to reflect back and realize, hey, that's a really good book. Let me give you some examples, okay? Okay, so this is a stack of books that I consider books that make me think. 1, The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. I actually really had a hard time reading this book. And if I'm totally honest with you, I actually hated the process the entire time, but I couldn't put the book down. And I have referenced this book, and I have quoted from this book so frequently that my children will be like, yes, we know it's from The Invisible Man. To me, despite how I felt while I was reading the book, the fact that it stuck with me afterwards is a sign that it's a really good book. So I highly recommend it. I mentioned this book yesterday in episode 12, that Frankenstein, I had such a hard time reading this book from the beginning because the language and Mary Shelley is such an eloquent and beautiful, like the way she weaves words together into a sentence is exquisite. And so the language of this book and just how beautiful it was, and it's one that I thought about the story itself for so long that for me, that means that it's a good book. If it sticks with me and I think about it long after I've read the book, and even if I've moved on and I've read other books, to me that shows like it's a really good book. Okay. This is Signature Classics by C.S. Lewis, but in particular, Screwtape Letters is a book that I have reflected on and referenced and quoted from for years. And so I think that is one of those books that if I have to wrestle through it and then I'm going to quote it later, that's a really good book in my opinion. Again, it's the idea is, does the book make me think? Then I think I should reference. Then that's a good book to me. If it's a book that like it doesn't make me think and it's easily forgettable, and I can tell you like, yeah, I read it, and I can probably tell you about what was in the book, but if it's not a book that I'm like, oh yeah, let me tell you about that book, let me tell you about how I reacted to that book, then that's how I define if it's a good book or a bad book. Bad book. The book not for me. How does the storytelling move me? Does it make me, does it feel formulaic, or does it make me like wrestle through the topics? One book that did that is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. After I read Anna Karenina, I actually went through and I've read almost everything by Leo Tolstoy. I was so fascinated by his writing process. I was so interested by the topics that he covered in his work. And his works and his short stories and his books, and that I was like, I just want to read more. But one of the things that I found so interesting is that actually when I was reading it, I felt a disconnect in the story, and that's not Leo Tolstoy's fault. That's what happens when you're reading a translation of a book that's not originally in English. There's a loss there because you don't understand like the culture, and you don't understand like how their thought process was, because it's a cultural difference and the language is different, and you're losing some of that emotion that's in the language because it's translated into the language you're reading it. And so I'm very grateful. While I was reading Anna Karenina, I had a friend at the time who was Russian, and I went and asked her extensively about the parts of the book that I didn't understand, and she was able to explain to me what I was missing from the English translation, and it was so moving. It made me appreciate it on a much deeper level. In the same way, like there are modern authors that I'm gonna leave unnamed, but there are modern authors that I have read, and sometimes their work feels very formulaic, and that bothers me because I'm like, where's the original story? Like every author has a voice, and if I can hear their voice, their writing style in it, that's great. But if the formulaic of their writing style overlaps their voice and their ability for storytelling, that's where they lose me a little bit. So I want a book that like, even if it moves me, I got it. So another way that a book has moved me is The Hobbit. Now this is the illustrated version of The Hobbit. I love this. It's beautiful. The illustrations are lovely. Let's see if we can, look at that. Isn't that so beautiful? But I love this book because I found the writing to be exquisite. I like the memory that it evokes because I read it aloud to my children. And it's one that we discuss a lot at home, and it's a book that I quote from. So in that way, like if the book stays with me because it moves me, that's phenomenal. Um, in the same way, sometimes when I'm reading, it takes me on like a little bit of a tangent in very unexpected ways. And I have gone on great journeys because the books are taking me on incredible adventures. So for instance, a few years ago, I went to go see Mount Rushmore, and as I'm going through and we're seeing other historical places there, I realized that I didn't really know a lot of information about the history of Native Americans in the United States. And so I went and bought a bunch of books about Native Americans, and this is In the Spirit of Crazy Horse by Peter Matheson. And I have numerous books. This is just one example. But I read this book, and then I just wanted to know more. I wanted to know more about like that tension that was there, the history that was there. And so it kind of led me on this path of like, okay, like I need to know more. I need to know more. Another topic that's done that is I read a lot about Cuba, and that was a great adventure because I learned a lot. And it's just really kind of like, there's a children's book called If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, and it just kind of shows like if you do this, then it leads to that, and it leads to that. And a lot of my reading journey is that, where I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. I would like to read more. And if it spurs me to curiosity where I want to read more, then I'm like, that's a really good book, because it got me thinking, and it made me like, I wasn't satisfied with what I learned in just one book. I needed more. Another one, this one is When the Mob Ran Las Vegas by Stephen Fisher. In Las Vegas, they have an incredible mob museum. And so if you want to go visit a part of Las Vegas that's not the Strip, if you want to go see something that is not a show or not a restaurant, go to the Mob Museum because it's so great. But when I was there, I was so interested by what they were explaining, the history of it, that I was like, I would like to know more. And so I went and got a bunch of books about the history of the mob in Las Vegas specifically. And it was such an interesting, I learned so much. It really kind of spurred me on to be like, wow, like there's a part of American history that you just don't know, and that there's so much more to the history of Las Vegas than just, you know, the grand hotels and the shows. And, you know, it's a lot, it is very layered. In the same way, I'll read a book and I'll be like, I need to know more about that author, or what else have they written, because I need to know more about that. And this is Admiral William H. McRaven. Now, you can tell, like, there's a lot of different books going on here. But this is his book, Sea Stories, My Life in Special Operations. He wrote a very famous book, started out as a speech, and it's called Make Your Bed. And I read Make Your Bed, and I was so moved by that book that I immediately went and bought everything he had ever written. Immediately. I was like, not only do I know I want to read everything he has written, I want to own everything that he has written. I want this part of my library. And that kind of led me on like reading about veterans and reading about like their stories. And it just set me on this tangent of like, I just want to know more. My curiosity has been piqued. I think do I have it nearby? I don't, but yesterday I mentioned the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society book, which is a book that I really liked. But one of the authors, in the middle of writing that book, she actually passed away. And I will tell you that I enjoyed that book so much that I went to go see what else that she had written, because I was like, I want to read everything she has ever thought about reading. And when I discovered that the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society book was not only her first book, but that she died in the middle of writing it, and that she didn't even get to see it published. So that means that she has no idea that it became a movie, which is just, you know, for an author, that's the dream, right? Like you see your book go on screen, because we're such a society now driven by technology and screens. And so I cried. I sat there and sobbed because her book had moved me so much, and I enjoyed it so much that I wanted to not just thank her for it, but I wanted to read more of what she had written. And it felt like a loss, because I felt like she had given us a gift with that book. and then we didn't have it anymore. So I would love to know, how do you define a good book or a bad book? Is a good book for you the same with me, where if you're thinking about it, or you're quoting about it, or you're referencing it, or it sends you off on a great tangent where you want to read more by the author or more about the subject? Or do you see it as reading a good book is just based on writing style and technique and all of that? Like, I would like to know, what do you reference as a good book or a bad book? And if it's a bad book, do you let that be known? Do you talk about the bad books? I don't. Even the author that I said, like, I don't want to mention, like, y'all, I'm not trying to like stir up drama. Her books aren't for me, and that's okay. That's totally fine. Sometimes you're gonna find books that you're like, that was not for me. So, anyways, that is how I determine a good book, bad book. Have a great day.